Is League of Legends a sport? That's what everybody wants to know, and it is. Okay, we're gonna break it down with the data. Please show this video to people who you don't think agree. Please use this as evidence in arguments with your friends and your families. Okay, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna compare League of Legends to probably one of the most watched, biggest, commercial sports within US, which is the NFL, right? Football. Everybody loves football. Football's great. I used to play football when I was a kid. But here's the thing. Esports has never been given the same exact respect as other mainstream sports and everything else, and I think that that's changing, and it should change. So let's start out talking about the fact that 5.6 million people play football in America every year, give or take. Okay, that seems like an impressive number, right? For the entire year, you have 5.6 million football players. Wow! Okay, League of Legends has a player count of 180 million monthly active players as of 2022. That number has gone up. Going up. Okay, you look at different venues when you look at these like high level big events, right? And we talk about like, well, what constitutes a sports? Like, are people really going to pay tickets to watch for people to play video games or watch people to like toss a football around or throw the old pigskin, right? And it's like, okay, let's look at it. The Super Bowl, on average, sells around 65,000 seats in an arena, right? And that's a whole year leading up to that event, right? Now, League of Legends is an esports tournament, so people are more inclined to watch it probably online, more so than, in a stadium, but they still have sold out 20,000 seat stadiums. The O2 Arena in 2024, 20,000 seats sold out. The Staples Center, 20,000 seats or more, I believe, sold out, right? So this isn't even just an event where people are going thinking, oh, well, we're just going to watch it online and no one ever really tunes in and this and that, right? I mean, you're talking about in 2023, your concurrent viewership was like 6.4 million people at one time. And they think in 2024 that it's almost doubled. Okay, imagine if you were talking about Super Bowl viewership and you were like, oh yeah, the Super Bowl viewership, which I think was around like 120 million. Yeah, next year we're going to do 240 million. Our fan base is just going to double overnight. Viewership double overnight. And the crazy thing is, those numbers are usually accounting for like the entire world, and not everybody is like super tuned into the Super Bowl. Whereas when you're talking about a global sport like League of Legends, you're going to have even more viewership internationally, and they can't really tally the numbers in China either. And China can account for several million, okay? And then you move on to talk about like, okay, well, I mean, what's the revenue like? And unfortunately in esports, I think it's sad that these players aren't getting played as much as a lot of other professional athletes because there's not as much exposure and it's not as respected as a sport. But I don't understand why. Like, at the end of the day, broadcasting sports is really about business, right? And when you look at that, like, okay, where's the big business coming for the NFL? Well, it's selling the jerseys and everything else, but realistically, a lot of it is the stadiums, it's the ticket sales, it's the sponsorships. So it's like, what are some of the biggest sponsorships in the NFL? You have Bud Light. Wow, that's a big company. That's a really, legit corporation. You have Visa. Wow, that's a really legit corporation. Microsoft, that's a really legit corporation. And then you start looking at League of Legends, you're like, well, what are these nerds getting sponsored with? I mean, it's gotta be like candy and soda pop and bubble gum, and like no one seriously as a business person would be interested in this. And this is something that I wrote a master's paper about when I was going through my MBA, which I haven't finished yet, specifically talking about how esports is this massive growing industry that so many companies, because they have archaic thinking, are turning a blind eye to, because you have these massive, young, integrated, technology-centered consumers who are very invested in this sport. And they're starting to wake up to that. League of Legends is sponsored by MasterCard, okay? They put on the opening ceremony. They are extremely big in the sponsorship of esports with League of Legends right now. You have Coca-Cola. Some of these sponsorships are from 2023. I wanted to make sure that the data I collected was like accurate based on the year, because it's hard to get things nailed down for 2024. Verizon has been a sponsor. Coca-Cola, massive soda and drink manufacturer, has been a sponsor. MasterCard, a financial institution that is rivaling, if not the same size as like Visa, These are not small companies. I mean, you could say that the NFL sponsorships are bigger, sure, and they probably are, but I think something that you should really keep in mind when you're looking at a lot of this information is that League of Legends has been around for 15 years. The NFL has been around for 155 years. The NFL started in 1869, okay? 1869. So imagine in 10 times the time when League is 150 years old, you know, if it's still League and there's not like a League of Legends tour or whatever, you have the same, just think about that. Like, how big it is now, given the fact that it's only 15 years old, and how big esports can potentially be. And a lot of people are like, yeah, but it's kids, man. It's just kids playing it. These are just kids playing video games, you know. Back in my day, well, back in your day, sports were taken seriously because of what they could do for your future, aka, like, collegiate sports and pathways and scholarships. It's becoming the same thing. League of Legends is 200 colleges have collegiate esport programs, okay? Including League of Legends, some of them for Valorant, some of them for CSGO, some of them for, you know, Call of Duty, right? It's not like a joke anymore, okay? The nerds are taking over. I'm sorry, but that's like the way it is, all right? Like, you have 200 colleges, and then on top of that, a lot of these colleges are now starting to offer scholarships and full rides for varsity esport players depending on the game, okay? So playing at a high school level and being committed to like tournaments and practicing and doing these things is a very realistic and honest way, depending on the college you're looking at going to get scholarship money and pay part of your tuition. It just drives me crazy that I grew up in a generation in time where I wish I had this kind of like backing for video games, and I was right at like the beginning of when esports started to come up and people were going to play video games professionally and streaming started to come up, and all of the people around me who, you know, were trying to give me the best advice for my life and everything were telling me, hey, no, it's not a real job, streaming's not a real thing, video games aren't, you know, they're not going to pay your bills, like, it's fun for a hobby, etc., blah, 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 blah. And I always thought that, like, hey, I'm really good at this, and I love doing this, and I would love to do this for a living. But it was like, no, you got to take your passions, you got to put them to the side and everything. But at the end of the day, like, that's not the world we're living anymore. Like, things are getting more and more technologically advanced. Esports are on the rise. People are tuning into these events. People are getting paid to do these things. Now, there's a lull in like payer payment and stuff like that the pros have been talking about, but there are academy teams now. There are more local tournaments now, right? This is something where, like, if you're truly passionate about the scene of esports and everything else, there are entire careers based around this, right? Whether it's the broadcasting or the design for like the opening ceremony stuff, or simply working for a video game company in like the esports angle with the marketing, right? It's a very, very serious and real career path to want to go into esports, not just as a player, but as like a full-grown adult who's passionate about video games, who wants to turn that into something that is real. So that's kind of my take on it. I've put some stats in this video in terms of like viewers and player bases and time in the industry and sponsorships and stuff like that. There's a lot more data out there that you could dig up, and I could turn this into an entire video essay that goes on for probably hours if I were to pull up every single study and all of the stats that are out there. But just know that, like, if you're passionate about these things, you should hold on to that and you should pursue it. And that's what I think about it. If you disagree, that's fine. But I think that it's worth looking into and respecting and kind of like checking your bias, because at the end of the day, a lot of people have disagreed with like what's going to be popular and what's going to be the new thing. People did it with the iPhone, people did it with the internet, people did it with social media, people have done it with a lot of technological advances that have come up throughout history. And fast forward 2 decades, and a lot of those people are wrong, right? So that's my thoughts. I'm Strike, this is Strike Gaming, and I will see you guys in the next one.